We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Dalet Amud Beis in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 74b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a brisa in which Rabbi Shimon was discussing a case of rimone badon. These are pomegranates of badon that are not bottle. But Rabbi Shimon said if you have a sveika, then we can be lenient in such a situation. What would be a sveika? Let's say, for example, one of the rimone badon and falls into a mixture of 10,000, but then from that group something comes out and falls into a mixture of 3, and then something from there comes and falls somewhere else. That would be a situation of a sveika. And the Gemara now asks, Ma'ishna shlosha, well, what's the difference that it has to fall into a group of 3, that there are now a total of 4, the ikaruba? The point is that you have a majority. In other words, the one that fell in is a minority. But shnayim nami ikaruba, but even if it falls into 2 others, wouldn't it be a majority against the one that fell in? So what is it that you need to have 3 over here? 2 should be sufficient. And the Gemara continues and says, My gimel de katani. Well, what does it actually mean in the brisa when Rabbi Shimon said 3? It actually means tarti vahu. It means 2 and this one. It really means a total of 3, not a total of 4. Rashi explains, Maishna shlosha vahu revi de botel bahu. Again, saying that it's the 4th. Why do we have to have it be the 4th? And so again, the Gemara ended up saying that what it actually means is tarti vahu, 2 and that one for a total of 3. And the Gemara continues, if you want, I can say, Savar Lok Rabbi Eliezer, that Shmuel on the previous Amud, again, Shmuel on the previous Amud said that by Avodah Zarah, we have to be strict even by a sveika, even by a double doubt. And on the previous Amud, the Gemara was trying to identify which Tana Shmuel holds like, and so the Gemara is now saying that Shmuel holds like Rabbi Eliezer. And Rashi explains, if you want, we can say that Shmuel holds like Rabbi Eliezer. Shmuel damar sveika da'avodas kochavim aser. Diamar Rabbi Eliezer, again, Shmuel, who holds we have to be strict by a sveika by avodah zarah. He holds like Rabbi Eliezer. Tetanan, as we learned in a Mishnah by Meseches avodah zarah, we learned in the Mishnah Meseches avodah zarah. Not al hemena eitzim asur ba'anoah hisik ben asatan or chodesh yutatz yoshan yutzon afabo asapas asura ba'anoah. And it says in this Mishnah, nisarva ba'acheros va'acheros ba'acheros. If it gets mixed up with others and others with others, talking about a case of sveika, asuros ba'anoah, they are forbidden ba'anoah. Rabbi Eliezer Omer yolech hano liyam hamelech. Rabbi Eliezer says the benefit has to be thrown to the Yam HaMelech. Alma, we see from this Mishnah, Isleilu Rabbi Eliezer sveika ba'avodas kochavim. Rabbi Eliezer is strict by sveika by avodah zarah. Midiktani va'acheros ba'acheros, from the fact that it says over here, acheros ba'acheros. And Rashi continues, Lishna Achrin, another understanding of this line in the Gemara, Savar Rabbi Eliezer, when the Gemara over here says that he holds like Rabbi Eliezer, a Rabbi Shimon Kai, we're actually going on Rabbi Shimon, again, Rabbi Shimon by Rimone Badon, who's creating the situation of a sveika, that it falls into 10,000, and from there it falls into 3, so we're going on that issue. Diyamar me ribo legimel, again he said it falls from the 10,000 into 3, and so we asked, why does it have to be into 3? It should be sufficient if it falls into 2, because it's still a majority. V'taritznan, so we first answered, Ma'ai shlosha tekatani trevahu. What does it mean 3? It means 2, and the one that fell in. It really means there is a total of 3. It's not a total of 4. And so now the Gemara is giving another answer. If you want, we could say, Gimel Dafka, it really does have to fall into 3. U'dekwamrin and Tiski betray, and you said that it should be enough if it falls into 2. Savar lo Rebbe Lozer, so we're going to say that Rabbi Shimon holds like Rebbe Lozer's version of Rabbi Eliezer. Diyamar lohita Rabbi Eliezer l'shnayim shnayim. This was on the previous Amud. Rabbi Lozer said within Rabbi Eliezer that we're only lenient if it's 2 at a time, not if it's taken 1 at a time. Hilkach bina de lahavid dalid. That's why it needs to be a total of 4. De l'shkelinu shnayim shnayim, that you can take it 2 at a time. Again, that was discussed on the previous Amud. But Rashi says v'rishon yosher ve'enai. Rashi says that the first approach seems to be the proper approach. And the Gemara continues, Amar Reish Lakish says, Chavis shel truma, a barrel of truma, shenisarva b'meya chevios, that gets mixed with 100 barrels, v'nafla achas mehen liyam hamelach, and then one of them falls to the Yam hamelach, hutru kulon, so they're all permitted. Da'aminan, because we say, hach de nafal, the isura nafal, the one that fell in, that was the prohibited one, and so therefore, everything else is mutter. And the Gemara says, V'itztrich Rav Nachman, V'itztrich Reish Lakish. We need the teaching of Rav Nachman that we had earlier with regards to the rings of Avodah Zarah, almost an identical teaching, and we need this teaching of Reish Lakish. De'imi de Rav Nachman have amina, because if we only had the teaching of Rav Nachman, so we would have thought, Hani mili avodas kochavim de'ein la matirin. I would have thought that that's true by Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is ein la matirin. There's no way that it can be permitted. Avol truma diyesh la matirin, but by truma there is something mutter that you can do with truma. So lo, no, maybe we would not be so lenient when it comes to truma. Rashi explains, Shenesarva b'kuf chevios, again talking about the barrel of truma that gets mixed with 100 barrels. Stumos, this is talking about closed barrels. Ve'aminon le'el, we said earlier, shein echad mi vav devarim shein and betelin. This is one of 6 things that's not bottle. That's why when it falls into 100, it's not bottle. Ve'itzrich de Rav Nachman damar le'el gabe tabos hachinami. We need Rav Nachman's teaching. He said the same thing by the rings of avodah zarah. And truma yesh la matirin. The Gemara here said that truma, it has a permitter. What it means to say is yimkarim kulam la kohanim. You can just sell everything to kohanim. By truma, it's not completely forbidden. And so therefore, since yesh matirin, since there is a permitter, there's a way to permit it. So therefore, we might have said we shouldn't be so lenient. And the Gemara continues, V'imid Reish Lakish, and if we just had Reish Lakish's teaching, Hava Amina, so then we might have thought, Chavis, when it comes to the barrel of Truma, Diminkara Nefilos, it's recognizable when it falls in, so there we're going to say that we can permit. Aval Tabas, the low Minkara Nefilos, when it comes to a ring, it's not Minkar, it's not recognizable when it falls into the mixture, so low, so therefore I would say we would not be so lenient, so Tzrichi, that's why it is necessary. Rashi explains, Chavis Gedola Mekoma Nikr. The point over here is that a barrel is large, so its location is clear, it's recognizable. Kishina Tula Mechavroseh, when it's taken from the rest of them. Hilkach Minkara Nefilosa, therefore its falling in is recognizable. That's what the Gemara means. Umukcha Milsa de Batalia, it's very clear that everything was dependent on that. Veloasi Lamemar Kulu Sharu below Nefilas Ha'echad Liyam. People are not going to say that they're all permitted without one of them falling into the sea. It's obvious that what makes it permitted is that one of them fell into the sea. Aval Tabas and Mekoma Nikr, but by the ring, the area where it is, it's not recognizable in that mixture of rings. Velo Minkara Nefilosa, so it's not clear when it falls into the Yam. V'yasi Lemeshrinu Meikara below Nefila. People are going to end up permitting without it falling into the Yam, and so therefore, again, that's why it's necessary to have both of these teachings. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabba, Rabba says, Lohita Reish Lakish Elachavis. Reish Lakish actually only permits it by a barrel to Minkar Nefilasa, because again, when it falls into the Yam, it's clear, it's recognizable. Avol Te'ena, but let's say it would be a fig, so then no, we would not be so lenient. Rashi explains, when it comes to a te'ena, when it comes to a fig, ketanhi, it's small, ve'in makam chesron, and nikar, again, the fact that it's missing is not obvious, therefore we cannot be lenient when it comes to a fig, talking here about a fig of truma. Rav Yosef Amr, and Rav Yosef says, afilu te'ena, even when it comes to a fig, because kinefilasa, the way it falls, kach aliyasa, so too, that's aliyasa, Rashi explains, kinefilasa kach aliyasa, means to say as follows, keshem shetchilas nefilasa, besocha heter, just like when it originally falls into what was permitted, it falls into the mixture. Nechsheves beinechol le'esor es elu. It's considered important enough to make everything forbidden. So kach kisha also mitochan. So too, when it leaves from them, yechashe beinechol makam aliyasa. So the area where it was is considered important, and it's important enough lahater. It's important enough that we would in fact say that it's permitted by a fig as well. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rebbe Lazar says, Chavis shel truma, a barrel of truma, again talking here about a closed barrel, Shenafla bekuf chevios, it falls among 100 barrels, so it's not bottle. Poseach echad mehen, he can open one of the barrels, v'notel heimenu kedei dimu, and take from it the amount of a mixture. It means to say he takes 1/100th. V'shosa, and then he's echad to drink. And Rashi explains, Bekuf chevios, again, stumos, we're talking here about closed barrels, the lo betelos, that they're not nullified. Poseach echad mehen, he can open one of them. V'keivan deniftacha, now once it's opened, the yesh la bittel, so now it is going to be able to have bittel, it will be nullified. Hilkach notel heimenu kedei dimua achas mimeya sheba, he can take kedei dimua, which is 1/100th, give that to a kohen. Do achas nesarva bekuf, because it was one that was mixed with 100, and so then that will make it permitted. And the Gemara continues and says, Yosef Rav Dimi v'kamar lo lahashmaita. Rav Dimi was sitting and saying over this teaching, Amar le Rav Nachman said to him, Gama v'shasi kachazina hach, it says over here, to swallow and drink, is that what we're saying? Rashi explains the question, Gama v'shasi kachazina hacha, dim kain de poseach lechatchila, are we saying that he can open it lechatchila, he can open the barrel? If that's true, hadakaimel chevio stumos de lo batli, that which we have established, which is the halacha that closed barrels are not nullified. So hechi mashkachas la, how is that ever going to happen? In other words, you have a situation all the time where lechatchila, you can take away the issue and you can make it batal, you can make it nullified. How could that be? We said it's not nullified. And so the Gemara continues and says, Ela ema, rather it should be said as follows, Niftacha achas mehen, if one of them became opened, you can't open in lechatchila. But if one of them was opened, so then notel hemena kedei dimua v'shosa, so then you could take from there enough of what's considered from the mixture, meaning 1/100th, and then he is in fact able to drink. And the Gemara continues, Amar Raboshia says, Chavis shel truma shenisarva b'meya v'chamishim chavios. If a barrel of truma is mixed with 150 barrels, v'niftechu meya mehen, and then 100 of them are opened, notel heimeno kadei dimua, again he takes kadei dimua from them, v'shos, and then he could drink. Again, that is going to create a situation of bittul, of nullification. Ushar asurn, but the remainder, meaning the other 50 barrels, they remain asur, ad sheyiftechu, until they're actually opened. V'lo amrin an isura beruba ise. We don't say that the isur was among the majority, among the 100, and therefore the other 50 are allowed. That we do not allow. Rashi explains, niftacha below miskavin, again, let's say they were opened without intention, the 100 barrels, so kedei dimua, then he takes kedei dimua, echad mikuf, or echad minun shebehen, he takes 1/50th of them in this situation, v'hashar asur sacha yiftachu, and then the rest are going to be forbidden until they're actually opened. V'lo aminun yitol achas min hakuf, the surah beruba ise, we don't say he could take one from the 100 and assume that the isur comes from the majority, v'yehakol mutter, and then it would all be mutter, that the other 50 can be open lechatchila. That we do not say. And the Shinuya Nuschos notes various girsos in Rashi. Some have the girs of echad mikuf shebehen, 1 out of 100. Some have the girs of echad mikuf nun shebehen, 1 out of 150. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Haroveya v'hanirba v'chulu. The Mishnah listed various animals that are disqualified as offerings, that get mixed up with animals that are offerings, that are supposed to be karbanos. And one of the animals in the list is a treifa. And the Gemara says, Bishlama kula lo yadi. I understand all the animals on the list. It's not recognizable. It wouldn't be known which animal is the one that was disqualified, and that's why you have a problem with this mixture of animals. Elahai treifa hechidami. But if we're talking about an animal that's a treifa, well, what exactly is the situation? Iyadiale. So if it's a kind of treifa that you can actually recognize, you can see that it's wounded, that it has this mortal wound. So leisi v'lishkali. So just take that animal, take it out, and then you could bring the rest of the animals. And iloya. If it's the kind of treifa that it's not recognizable, it's some kind of internal wound. So mino yada diarif. So how did he know in the first place that it got mixed up with the other animals? He never would have known that this animal is a treifa. And the Gemara continues, Amri devei Rabbi Yanai, they said in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai, Hacha b'may askina, here what are we dealing with? Kagon diariv nekuvas hakots b'derusas hazaev, the animals that got mixed up, one of them had nekuvas hakots, he had a thorn that created a hole, and then the other one was drusas hazev, it was torn, it was ripped by a wolf. The drusas hazev, that is a situation of a treifa. The other case looks identical, but it's not a treifa, so you can have two animals, you know there was a treifa, but now you cannot identify which one is the treifa. That's the answer of Devei Rabbi Yanai. Reish Lakish says another answer. Kagon di'ariv bin nefula, the case could be that the animal fell, and so therefore there's nothing visible, but it was known that it fell. But the Gemara says, nefula nami livdika, but by nefula also, let's say it falls, you also should be able to check. And so the Gemara says to that, there's no way to check kasavar, because in the Tana of our Mishnah holds amda, that let's say it's able to stand. Tzricha me'es leis, you still need to wait 24 hours. Holcha, and even if it walks, tzricha bedika, it's still going to need an examination. And so therefore you have a situation here where you're not able to properly identify the animal. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar, Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Kagon di'arev bevlad treifa. The case over here is that it got mixed up with the offspring of a treifa. So it's not recognizable, but the offspring of a treifa is also disqualified from the Mizbeach. And this answer, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah of Rabbi Eliezer, our Mishnah would follow Rabbi Eliezer. The Amar Vlad treifa lo yikrav lagavi Mizbeach. Rabbi Eliezer says the offspring of a treifa is not allowed to be offered on the Mizbeach. And the Gemara explains why each particular Amora didn't use the answer of the other Amoraim. The Gemara says, Kulu Rabbi Yanai lo Amri. All the Amoraim, they didn't want to say like Rabbi Yanai, because Bain Nekuvas HaKots Ledurusas Hazaev made the idea. You actually can tell the difference between Nekuvas HaKots when it's pierced by the thorn or when it's torn by the Ze'ev, when it's clawed by the wolf. You could tell, made the idea, it is known. Because Hai Mashach, because one of them is elongated, V'hai Ogil, and the other one is rounder, the Ze'ev is Mashach, and therefore you'd be able to tell. And Keresh Lakish lo Amri, the Amoraim didn't want to say Reish Lakish's answer. Reish Lakish's answer again had to do with Bedika, had to do with the fact that it needs inspection, because Kasavri, they hold Amda Bedika Eina Tzricha Me'es Leis. If it stands up, you don't need to wait for Me'es Leis 24 hours. And Holcha, if it walks, Eina Tzricha Bedika. It actually doesn't need any examination. So there would be a way to identify whether the animal is a treifa or not. And Rebbe Yirmiyah lo Amri, the reason why the Amoraim didn't want to say like Rebbe Yirmiyah, who said we're talking about a Vlad treifa, and it follows Rebbe Eliezer, because Rebbe Eliezer lo mukmi, they did not want to say that the Mishnah follows Rebbe Eliezer, who we generally do not hold like. And Rashi explains, Kasava Reish Lakish holds, Amdal Ragle, let's say the animal stands up, Afilu Hachi Tzricha Me'es La'es, still you're going to need 24 hours. V'afim Holchan, even if the animal walks, Tzricha Bediko La'achar Shchita, so there's going to need to be an inspection after the animal is slaughtered. She'ein Zu Bedika, so that's not considered to be a good examination, and so therefore, again, that's why Reish Lakish says, since there's no way to examine the animal while it is alive, that's why you have a problem over here with this mixture. You will not be able to identify which animal is the treifa. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Kachim bekachim, let's say again, various animals that are karbonos get mixed up. So min b'mino, if they're the same kind of carbon, you just don't know who the owner is. So then you'll just offer it for whoever the owner is. The Gemara says, how can you do that? V'haboy smicha, don't the animals require smicha? You have to lean on the animal, and that must be done by the owner. So how can you simply offer the animals for whoever the owner is without knowing who the owner is? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef says, Bekarbon nashim, we're talking about a carbon of women, they don't do smicha. And the Gemara says, Aval bekarbon anashim lo, but when it comes to the carbon of men, that would not be the case. And Rashi explains, V'haboy smicha, but isn't smicha required? B'va'ol of it, you need to have smicha with the owner. V'lo yadiyah, we don't know who the owner is. Aval karbon anashim lo, this Rashi says this is a question. When it comes to carbon anashim, that's not the case. Lo miskasher b'tarovis. It will not be kosher when there's a mixture bitmia. The Gemara is asking this as a question, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph.